ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank and seek His assistance, and we repent to Him for our shortcomings. We convey our salutation to the Holy Prophet of Islam, the most noble Prophet, and his noble progenies. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitan al-la'in ar-rajim. وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لَقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And it is among His signs that He has created for you wives and partners from yourselves, so that you may find tranquility and peace in them. And He has created love and kindness between you. Surely in this there are signs for those who reflect. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I must congratulate Brother Sarmat. That opens up opportunities in case the engineering and the university doesn't work. That is another option. Whether the community responds or not, that's a different thing. Inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help the community. It's a good cause. So let's see what happens. Last night, I have been given 4 topics, at least for the night, 4 occasions that we meet. The first night, we looked at one of those topics. The second was specifically the individualism and collectivism, which was last night. And tonight, the concept of modern family from an Islamic perspective. I had a meeting with the sisters last night, clearly indicated that this is the most apt discussion that we should have in the light of diverse and the number of questions that they had. So we are going to continue with this. Unfortunately, the time is limited, so I can only spend certain amount of time addressing it. I might fall victim to the dislike of the brothers, the way I'm going to present the topic tonight. So inshallah, they would forgive me for this. Let's go back, recap on the questions that we addressed, or the topic that we addressed last night, for the benefit of those who were not present. I made it clear that there is certainly a discourse in the Western literature regarding individualism and collectivism. There are a number of disciplines in the academia that this concept has been addressed. We talk about it in politics, in international relation, economics, social, psychology, psychoanalysis. These are all various disciplines that the issue of collectivism and individualism is being discussed, and how it affects the main theme of their own discipline. Last night I made it clear that I don't intend to dwell in the issue too much beyond, in the interest of time, scratching of the surface. However, I made it clear that if you look at the literature, the current literature that exists, it appears that there is either or understanding or presentation of this. Either you have to be individualistic, which primarily in a capitalist society, or you have to be collectivist, that in the past used to be the socialist kind of economic system. Now that there is no more socialism or communism, and we have toxic capitalism taking over, we have to understand how we reconfigure this dichotomy that exists between individualism and collectivism. From an Islamic point of view, Islam counters such a either and or mutually exclusive understanding of individualism and collectivism. Islam uses need and in the construction of its own worldview and the social construction brings together, synthesizes both of them, but creates different domains for individualism and different domains for collectivism. If you look at, say, those of you who know Farsi and look at the literature that we have in Persian language about fard wa ijtima, individual and the collective. Similar kind of thing exists in Arabic and in other society, in English, French, and others. This debate is not new. How do we bridge the gap between the individual and the collective? Islam comes up with a view that considers these to be complementary with each other rather than mutually exclusive in opposition to each other. Islam says in the individual domain, one spends time to learn about personal identity, to learn about patience and positive attributes in one's life. You use the domain of individualism to create a vision, to submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to become accountable, etc., etc., etc. The area and the context in which they can be practiced and connect and engage others becomes the domain of the collectivism. So they are not mutually exclusive, they work as a complementary factors. Tonight, so the issue of collectivist or the social structure, once we accept that humans are, as Aristotle says, are political animals, they need a social structure to live and thrive and survive, the social structure, the society becomes a place in which we utilize our energies, we discover ourselves in relationship to others, and we deal with social challenges. Family becomes a small scale or miniature scale of that social collectivism that we talked about. Few nights ago, I pointed out that Islam, in my deliberation, how culture and its baggage should be dealt with, one of the factors that I pointed out was Islam came right from the beginning and made it clear that it intends to establish a just society on earth, where under the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people become enlightened and they work for justice, they stand for justice, and they oppose injustice. It obligates every single one of us not to be passive, but be active. And challenge the environment that we are in. I disagreed with those that say, well, the best that we can do is to prevent ourselves from being assimilated. For the more mature individual within our community, this might work. But for the younger generation, confronted with 3 crises in their lives, is not going to work. The youth at the moment in most of the European countries, there are a number of books that recently have written by a number of authors from Europe. The Muslims' participation in the political structure in Europe, in France, United Kingdom, Belgium, Denmark, and a few other places. When you read it, the crisis that the youth are suffering over there is exactly the crisis that the youth are suffering here. Two issues. They are lost in establishing their own personal identity. Who are they? And it doesn't make any difference as far as the gender. Boys and girls, they have the same kind of problem. Personal identity, they want to make a contribution to the society, to the civil society that they are in. And they want to construct, I just heard it from the tone and the narratives used by Brother Sarmat, that we want to be active in our society. We want to create that ethical and moral role model for the rest of the society that is desperately in need of this. What happened to the classical establishment? The scope of activity is narrowed down to certain basic things, and the youth that they want to be active in the society, somehow, either we don't understand them or we don't allow them. This is going to be detrimental to the future of our own community. Now, one of the fundamental problems or issues that we really need to address, the topic for tonight. We say the contemporary understanding of marriage and how Islam thinks about it. Let's look at what contemporary understanding is. You can live, a child can live with two mothers, two fathers, single mothers, single fathers, divorced parents that they have, the biological parents and the current parents. So in some instances, a child has four parents, however configuration that they can find themselves out, and four grandparents, etc., etc. So let us assume we ignore the anomalies that exist. A divorced husband and wife, a father and a mother that they are divorced. Now, each one goes and marries again. So a child has a father and a stepmother, and a mother and a stepfather. And this permutation opens up. The fundamental crisis that this develops is that a child gets confused how to navigate this personal relationship with the rest of the community. I attended one of the functions at the old school that my children go to, and my daughter came to me and she said, Dad, you see these people? I said, yes. They are somehow associated with this child that is sitting in front of us. And you ask the child, who's your mother? Well, biological mother is this, but stepmother is this. Biological father is this, but the other stepfather is that. So the notion that when we talk about contemporary relationship or contemporary marriage or family structure, in the light of the erosion of values that used to exist in the society, we have created a mishmash that our children, if we put them into that environment, they're going to get confused. On the one hand, if this was not bad enough, now we have the feminist narrative that they are to liberate women, deliberately want to break up the old family structure, because the old family structure, according to the liberated intellectual mind of feminism, is a burden which we have to break it down. So what do we have these days? If you allow some of these head of Western feminists, a woman should be allowed to have a husband as well as another partner. This partner could be another man or another woman. The husband is again in what they call open relationship. Is this what we want for our future children? Or something else? Islam, when it comes to Islam, the failure within our own community, it's not just the fact that our children are exposed to these multiplicity of opinions and ideas that they are being bombarded with. There is no consensus, there is no coherent language that defines what is the family structure for our children that they can relate to. On the one hand, we have an antiquated reading of our literature that needs to be revisited. We have cultural baggage, as it appeared last night in the conversation that we had, and what we call asymmetrical relationship between husbands and wife, in which the husband gives order and the wife has to take order. And if you question, immediately they appeal to a verse, Surah Nisa, الرجال قوامون على النساء. The fact that this verse has so many interpretations is neither here nor there. I become, or the husband becomes the judge, the jury, and the executioner at the same time. This is my interpretation of the text and gives me the benefit of dictating to my partner. We have failed to develop a language. The cultural baggage is another factor. And what do we have in our community? 43% of our marriages lead to divorce. This is not in the older generation, by the way, brothers and sisters. In the marriages within the younger generation. We have in Dearborn, the number of families that they come to the Islamic Center asking for divorce, they range age from 19, 20, maximum 30. On occasion, husbands and wife from our own Shia community come for divorce after 6 months of marriage. Various reasons. Where do we go from here? If divorce wasn't bad enough, we have now violence at home, domestic violence. The statistic clearly shows that now Shia and Muslim families in the United States are suffering the same percentage of domestic violence that is the rest of the community. The concept of marriage in Islam. Because the fundamental principles that we should adhere to and interpret our text and confine and define our action under it, we have forgotten about it. We appeal to one verse in the Holy Quran, to وَضْرِبُوهُنَّ. Well, Quran says hit them. But we don't understand the context, that there is nowhere in the Quran that says dharb is not physical violence. Come and explain it to a cultural baggage that says my father used to do it, my grandfather used to do it. As the sister said last night, I said, I refuse to accept, once we define certain conditions that marriage has to fulfill. Quran says right from the beginning, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created from yourself, which means equal to you, individuals, that they become the source of tranquility in your life. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Not only the concept of the equality, the concept of the source of love and affection in your life, the relationship must rest on compassion and mercy and love between these individuals. We forget about this. So what happens in the individualistic sense that we were supposed to configure ourselves and submit to the command of Allah and become muttaqi and God-centric, concept of Tawheed is totally forgotten. Tawheed becomes some abstract philosophical issue that we talk about it whenever we want to discuss theology. The notion that Tawheed is supposed to permeate in our life, supposed to be the central figure that literally controls everything and holds together everything, is neither here nor there. So the concept of Tawheed, if there is a verse in the Holy Quran, must be interpreted with the notion of Tawheed first. Number two, our position. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah says in the debate of metaphorical use of language, the debate between Allah and the angels, إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, I intend to create a vicegerent on earth. What's the role of vicegerent? Khalifa. To become the protector of everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. Correct? Including our responsibility towards our partners and our family. It's a privilege given. If Quran says وَالرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ, Qawwam means a protector. It's a privilege given to you to protect the rest of the family. It's not a symmetrical relationship, a power relationship that you can dictate to your family. What happened to the notion that I cited last night? Quran says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Every single human being, there is an inherent dignity in that person. My wife has a dignity or not as a human being? Your partner has a dignity or not? If that dignity had to be protected, how can you hit? And how can you become violent? How can you be unjust? What's the role of the vicegerents then? Part of our responsibility on earth that we have to be conscious in the context of individualism we have to develop is that we, as a creme de la creme of creation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers the best of the creation, and given that responsibility to it to protect, we have to be just and represent Allah's justice on earth. The third component here is justice itself. How can we be just? Stand in front of the podiums in say, Islamic centers and talk about justice to the rest of the world, but when you turn around in our own house, we fail to deliver justice. For those who understand Farsi, I believe this poem is Hafiz. وَإِذَنْ كِنْ جِلْوَ دَرْ مِهْرَابُ مَنْبَرْ مِكُنَانْ چون به خلوت می روند اون کار دیگر میکنند, which refers to a contradiction between action and verb and word. We preach, but we don't practice it. What is the concept of justice then? Quran says Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you as a sign, created from you individuals, that they're supposed to be the center of tranquility. The question is, what is the objective and the goal of marriage within Islamic point of view? If you look at one of the crises that we have in the West, the objective is purely materialistic and animalistic. The institution of marriage is a legal institution that is supposed to satisfy the intimate relationship between a man and a woman, or some other combination that it has become legal in the United States. But from an Islamic point of view, it's between man and a woman. Islam says that's not the objective. That's the secondary reason. The primary objective is for this coming together to become spiritually united and move towards that ultimate justice that we're supposed to deliver and become collective. It's the spiritual end that we must focus upon, and the spiritual goal that we must focus upon. Otherwise, if it was purely intimate and physical, instead of saying من تزوج فقد أعطي نصف السعادة أو حفظ نصف دينه, whoever marries half of his deen and faith is protected, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him half of the contentment and bliss. Instead of focusing on what we call more permanent conditions in marriage, would have told you, well, you are a man. Well, why should you focus on patience and everything else? Go and find the most voluptuous partner, and then you marry her, because that, if the issue is primarily intimate relationship. And if you are a woman, find somebody with chest as big as Arnold Schwarzenegger and with 6 packs to go with it. An Arabian stallion. This is why this kind of language is absent from the text, for God's sake. What it says focus on what we call kuf, finding a compatible partner, focus on piety, humility, God consciousness, generosity, knowledge, commitment, patience, and other positive attributes. These are the attributes that remain part of, otherwise within 5 or 6 years, 10, 20 years, gravity pulls and mashallah, the weight is added, unless people like Brother Sarmat that constantly goes to the gym. The rest of us, we fail. So we fall behind from becoming the ideal specimen of a partner. Brother Ali includes that you as well. So we both are part of that. That's not the understanding. Islam, when it says, go and search from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi, when somebody comes to him and says, what should I look for in my partner? Imam says, don't look for a rose in a trash. Metaphorical use of language. The beauty, but in an environment that is not conducive to the stability between husbands and wives. If right from the beginning, we search for the wealthy individual, the younger individual, the more qualified individual, not because that qualification will become conducive in our relationship, because we earn more dollar out of it. I can earn 200,000 and my partner can add another 200,000 to it. If that's the case, then we have fundamental problem. But if we follow the guidance and says, focus on more concrete concept, the path to stability in the family relationship starts before marriage, not after it. When you begin to search for your prospective partner, understand, sit down, brothers and sisters, and make a list. What am I looking in my partner? Go through these conditions and see which ones are transient, which ones are more permanent. Focus on the permanent one. These days, what we have is that we focus on more transient issues. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. We focus on more transient issues, and then once the crisis starts later on, we worry, why is it that my lifestyle is not normal, our relationship breaks down, or I have to wait for the sake of a child, otherwise I'll accept all the injustices, maternal instinct, etc., etc. Why? Because we didn't open our eyes and we didn't focus on the conditions that we need early on. Marriage within Islam is a holy institution for two individuals, two eyes. Remember the I in the individualistic stage and the we in the collective stage? Two eyes come together, evolve spiritually and as well as materially. And they become one spirit in two bodies. They work together. The true marriage is when your partner wakes you up early in the morning and says, look, it's prayer time. When you feel down, your partner stands up. Remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is with us in this struggle. When you are down, comes in, whether it's the man or the woman, and tells the other partner to keep faith. And remain faithful, remain hopeful, etc., etc. The institution of marriage within Islam, from Islamic point of view, is not an institution that purely defined within material and intimate satisfaction. That's there. It has to be there. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created such a need, it has to be satisfied. But it is something else that we need to focus upon. This is where this community needs your guidance. You as a Muslim community, I mentioned last night and the night before, we have to come out with a principle community or principle society, or at least the ideas of principle society, that we can present it to the rest of them. But if we fail to deliver it in our own household, then we have a fundamental problem. If we cannot explain it to the rest of the community, what is an ideal family in Islam? What is the role, what is its goal to the building of that we call ideal society? Few nights ago, I talked about what Martin Luther King called it the beloved community. It's through the family, the mosaic, the small scale, that we learn how to interact, to be just, to be patient, to be loving, to be caring, to be respectful, and to be down to earth. Not to be arrogant, to be humble. When my partner stands and corrects my mistake, I shouldn't respond in a negative way. I should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granting me such a partner that corrects my mistakes. Al-mu'minu mir'atul mu'min. The mirror image, in which we see our own shortcomings in this mirror. Where else can you find a better scenario in which your partner becomes that mirror that you correct yourself and you elevate? If you look at the literature from our Imams, the Holy Prophet and so on, doesn't make it, the Holy Prophet ﷺ doesn't say the most fortunate individual is an individual that has most beautiful wife. No. It says the most fortunate individual is the person, an individual that has more humble, more respectful, more God-fearing, more committed individual. These are factors that we have to consider in the, not the ideal, at least the practical marriage that we have. We have spent time for a few questions as it coming. I think the brother told me to remind everybody else that there is some kind of noha, or is it after the lecture?
Yeah, so
there is a famous story. Let me end with this story, and then I was going to ask that everybody focuses or at least directs the question towards the topic so we can cover issues that the time has not allowed us. One of the young men from Africa comes, converts to Islam, and begins to live in the midst of the Medina. One day the Holy Prophet comes to him and he says, Ya Juwaybar, do you want to get married? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm from Africa, nobody's going to give me their daughter. He said, take this letter, go to the richest man in Medina that is known to have the most beautiful girl in the house, and tell them that Muhammad says, or the Holy Prophet says, that Holy Prophet says, I am to marry your daughter. Just imagine the Jahiliyyah mindset. Somebody knocking at the door, and this guy opens the door, the richest man on earth in the Medina, and some riffraffs coming in with a letter claiming that I want to marry your daughter. They must have gone ballistic. Conversation develops inside the house. The father says, well, the answer is quite clear. Let's go to the Prophet himself and find out. They go to the Prophet. He said, yes, I send him. But I am the richest man in Medina. You see the mindset? How can I give my daughter that the princes and so on are coming to ask for her hand? He said, that's not the issue. Islam came to revolutionize, turn around these value systems. Taqwa is the one that you should focus upon. And in my opinion, you cannot find a better son-in-law than this person. Marries the daughter of the richest man. The next night, the next day dies as a martyr in Badr. Islam came to dismantle that the cultural baggage that is part of Jahiliyyah mindset. So as parents, when you think about your daughters and your sons, don't think about where can I search around another doctor, another engineer, another dentist, another. Immediately dollar numbers come in front of your eyes. No, think about the value system. Who's going to respect my daughter? Who's going to love my daughter? Who is going to honor my daughter? How many of you actually shown this honor and dignity in your life? When was the last time you bent in front of your wife and kissed her hand for your children to see? When was the last time you forgave? When was the last time you honored? But didn't the Holy Prophet do the same thing? He used to bend in front of Khadija. Muhammad Rasulullah, Khatam al-Nabiyyin and everything else, bend in front of Khadija and kiss her hand. Stand up every time Fatima walked in to show to us, the mortals, how should we behave when it comes to our children. Give them the personality and the confidence that they are. Build these values into them. Not accept beating, violence because of my maternal instinct to keep a family relationship. The moment the child is born, sisters and brothers, the moment the child is born, you don't take it from me, go and read literature. It's as if there is a recording system in the mind of a child that starts working until they reach puberty and adolescence and above. What they see in the early ages of a child becomes the basis for constructing their identity and their pattern of behavior when they become old enough. Don't spoon feed your children. Let them develop. Let them taste hardship. But don't be physical. Be respectful. And as a mother, don't accept physical violence. This is not protection. This is violation of right. So let's ask the questions, and then inshallah the food will be served, and probably you will have after the food a meeting inshallah.
After the question answer,
the food, latmiya. Okay. Okay. So any questions? Don't all rush at the same time. Sister. Wa alaikum salam. I think one version of the old style of what we call arranged marriage, one version of it. There was a version that Islam rejects, in which parents decide who the boy or the girl to marry. There was no say for the child at all, or for the individual at all. That's not acceptable. But there was another version, more pragmatic, let's put it, in which a child goes to the parents once he or she gets to the age in which they feel that they have the potential to accept the responsibility with another partner. They go and say, well, we want to remind you that we are thinking along this path. And parents would sit with them and come up with the list of characteristics that the boy or the girl are looking for in their prospective partner. The advantage that they had, what these days our marriage agencies are organizing, but particularly in a much more narrow materialistic life, in spiritual as well. The advantage that it had, the parents would immediately tap into resources that are available in the community, whether it was the mosque, other individuals, and they come up with, say, 1, 2, or a list of 3 prospective candidates that satisfied close enough those values that each individual had. And with the recommendation, with the help and advice of the parents, they are told what to look for, not to purely materialistic. And then they allow the two individual, the boy or the girl, to sit down and look through the list and see, okay, which one they would prefer. They initiate some kind of conversation. This, to a degree, because now you tap into the resources of the community. You talk to teachers, you talk to the mosques, you talk to the neighbors, you talk to the shopkeepers that they see these individuals, you talk to friends. You begin to establish a pattern, an image of the person. By the way, in the laws of probability, 0 to 1, you cannot be certain, one, that you're going to get perfect partner. There was an old caricature of a woman skeleton with the long white hair sitting on a table saying that I'm still waiting for ideal partner. We don't think about the ideal partner. What we need to do is to look at the laws of probability. The more investigation that we do about the background on a person, we are shifting the pendulum from 0 towards 1. We are getting closer, but there is always the possibility of mistake. That is much more adapt to the current crisis, to avoid these, oh God, one commitment, no, the second one, this one didn't work, which the Western alternative of establishing relationship. The problem is, well, we are living as a minority somewhere else. We have no access to the resources that our parents and others have back home. How do we do about it? There are a number of mosques now in Canada and United States that they are beginning to develop the idea of collecting names and families come to the center and they say we have a daughter and a son or whatever that they want to get married. We are looking for these criteria. So the imam of the center or more elders, wise guys of the center, they start searching around and finding possible alternative, but leaving ultimately the option open to the individual or the family to decide for themselves. This is close enough. Once you upload or download the responsibility to the shoulder of the boy and the girl, well, it's your life, you decide. So trial and error is going to create the example that you gave. Even at the best of my ability, I will have a potential only to find out that it all was a show during courting, and after that, the true nature comes out. So some people are moving. There was a conference in Dearborn that they came to the Islamic Center from this organization, and they said that we have an extensive list that with the help of parents, they put the name of their children, or at least possible, they look for possible candidates for their children, and the conditions are given, the characters are listed. This might be an alternative for finding partners rather than allowing the children to decide for themselves. It's strange. Last night, I had nearly everybody had a question, and when I told them that we will discuss it tonight, now I think we have to organize just purely sisters program, so that the husbands, the brothers, and the sisters are not around. They might feel free to decide. By the way, we did the same thing with the youth. Those of you who remember in the old days when we organized at the National University program, as soon as we asked, well, as long as the parents were around, we asked the youth, okay, do you have any question? No, nothing. As soon as we asked the parents, okay, please exit, everybody's hand was up. They all had questions. So I think this is so sensitive that everybody is thinking about, well, balance of power at home, we might as well keep quiet. We need to organize something. Brother Ali, and then we have a sister in the back.
It is an extraordinary sensitive issue, and most of us are not used to speaking freely about what's on our mind. But one of the things I wanted you to speak to is the hadith that speaks about that we're told that our human intimate relations is an ibadah.
Yes.
I would like to speak.
Yeah, everything that, Brother Ali, everything, if we, in the month of Ramadan, if you look at the literature for the month of Ramadan, it's quite explicit that says even nawmukum ibadah, even your sleep is ibadah. If things are done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to avoid, to develop oneself and one's character and to avoid submission to shaitan and disobedience, even breathing becomes ibadah. It's not just the intimate relationship becomes ibadah, even the ordinary breathing. If you do it for the sake of Allah, if the intimate relationship is to stabilize one's life so that we can submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in much more relaxed condition, this becomes ibadah. So anything that is done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala becomes ibadah. If sleep can become ibadah during the month of Ramadan, definitely this is much better candidate for being ibadah than the sleep. Sister. I can't hear you. There is an echo from your side. Can somebody give them? Yeah, if you bring that. Sorry. It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I just don't want anybody to think that I'm talking my own personal problem, but there are a lot of ladies in the society, because I'm older, they come to me and discuss their situation. I really like to know the solution. Then you mentioned that if there is no justice in the house and they have to oppose it and discuss it with their husband or wife or husband with the wife, in the situation that there is a resistance, what would you do? I mean, they still don't believe that they're doing something unjust. Stand up.
Yes, you stand up to injustice.
We're already standing.
Yeah, you stand up to injustice. You oppose injustice. You try. You see, there is a verse in the Holy Quran that concept or that brings in the notion of nashes or nushuz. When a husband becomes disobedient or when a wife becomes disobedient. If a husband becomes unjust, that's the basic concept of nushuz and disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And hence, Quran lays down certain steps for the resolution of conflict. Number one, you start talking to your partner, personally. If it fails, you bring in, last night I made this clear, institution of marriage or family relationship, to begin with, is the responsibility of two individuals. But if it fails, because they are part of society, it becomes an obligation for the society to intervene. But with a step taken from members of that institution within the marital relationship to come forward. So the notion of hakaman min ahliha wa hakaman min ahli, the wise guys of the community or the society to come forward and try to resolve the issue. Certainly there is nothing in Islam that says if there is injustice in whether it's in society or household, keep quiet and say nothing about it. It's part and parcel. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. If we allow that to happen within the household, we have allowed it to develop within the society. So if I see my partner being unjust, then there are some requirements that I need to follow. In the same way as if my partner sees me unjust, for her to follow that step. But the steps are clear. If there is something that personally these two individuals as far as the conflict that exists, they can resolve it, then it is their responsibility primarily to resolve the issue between themselves. If they cannot, or they have tried and never worked, then they have to bring in people from outside. The role of the counselors, marriage counselors that we have today, is the role of the wise guys within the community that in the past, as you say in Farsi, Rishsefidaya Mahal, that came in and tried to resolve the issue. But there is nothing in Islam that says that you have to accept injustice within the community or within the family relationship.
That there are certain families who have children, and I have seen it just ends up with divorce, and the kids have no father.
Well, this is a conflict, sister, between two evil. A person will decide, should I break a relationship because the role model doesn't exist? Or should I accept a relationship and that I have to suffer and my children are witnessing the injustice and they grow old and the abused become the abuser of the next generation? That's for them to decide. Sister, you had a question. Yeah.
My question was just to ask if there's a way to filter out those respectable marriage sites or masjids that offer the marriage programs, services.
If you send me an email, I'll try to send few sites that they are organized by dedicated individuals and they really want to serve the community. It's not something that they really want to serve the community, because the person who came to the Islamic Center and talked to me, he said, I suffered because of my daughter. And I knew how difficult it was for her to go through, and we came up with this idea. So it was a personal experience. Send me an email, I'll try to see what I can do, inshallah. Yes, bro. If we can pass the microphone here.
A major problem now with the young men trying to get married is the financial aspect. Mm-hmm. Because you have just brought up a story about Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, when he sent this poor man to this rich father. At that time, when Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam was there, the rich man accepted the fact. But now, 1400 years ago, when a young man, the other day my son sent to me saying, Daddy, I'm thinking of getting married. So I said to him, okay, that's a good idea, perfect, but you have to start saving. So he turned to me and he said, can you tell me how much I'm supposed to save? Because it is so hard to go to a family, respectable family, and ask for the hand of a daughter without having to prepare for getting married. And this is a major problem. So do you think that we need some sort of guidance, some sort of education in that respect? Thank you. Sure.
I mean, remember, some of these cultural baggage that we were talking about first night is the extreme expectation that we have. Occasionally, cases, a bride and groom come to the Islamic Center with the mahr or dowry of astronomical figure. And I have asked the husband or the bride, I don't see you ever being capable of giving such a dowry to the bride. And in most cases, this is the image that they want to build. That my daughter is worth $100 million. Literally, I'm selling my daughter, putting a price on her. And my son-in-law is prepared to accept this price, knowing fully well, if you beat her up 6 months from now, if it's hard enough, she will forget about the 100 million just to give her freedom to get out. So some of these cultural baggages that exist that we really need to educate. That's number one. Education must be there. Re-evaluate the system and focus on something not material, much more permanent. And in cases where if we were to reduce our expectation, there is Baytul Mal that is supposed to provide the financial assistance for those who want to get married and they don't have the financial support. But the problem is nobody provides any money towards Baytul Mal anyway. So we expect Baytul Mal to provide for our sons to get married, but at the end of the year, we look through all the ways to escape IRS's tax, but we are not prepared to pay khums. All these flip-flops, oh, I pay tax here, I have expenses there, this should be considered as khums. Or Marja has to come and build the center for us. These kind of, if you look at the text with regard to Baytul Mal and this distribution of wealth, part of it, the Sahm al-Imam that you take for people who make such a contribution is within the jurisdiction of the marja or the authority that exists to spend it on. One of them is this. Cases of individuals that they want to get married, but they don't have the financial resources. But not the financial resources that we construct as an image, a reasonable financial resources to start a life together. And it's exactly this kind of expectation that the youth are not prepared to come forward and get married. They know fully well the existence or the presence of a partner would develop the spiritual and moral character. But the problem is, where can I go to have a partner that the first thing that they would not ask me, how many houses do you have? How much money income do you have? How many cars do you have? How many holidays? Nobody says, do you have patience? Nobody says, are you humble? Nobody says, are you God-fearing? Etc., etc. So on the one hand, there is a step, economic step, to support such community. On the other hand, the community has to be educated, or parents have to be educated, not to sell, not to have this exuberant material expectation for something that's supposed to be as simple as possible, at least at the beginning. Yeah, and then the sister.
So I guess this kind of came in my mind when he was asking. This kind of came in my mind when the brother was asking the last question. When it comes to being more realistic, for our younger generation, the Quran warns us about financial systems of usury, and we have in America what's called the Federal Reserve, and we've seen lots of economic recessions and depressions, which makes gaining financial stability harder and harder, especially for younger generations. The unemployments are going through the roof. How do we take into account understanding how the financial system and how society works to becoming more compassionate towards youth and understanding their situation, so that they don't wind up, they're like already, past like maybe 30 or 40 years old and they haven't gotten married yet, and some people maybe they leave the religion of Islam because of it.
I think this, as a topic, it's outside the theme for tonight, more of an economically oriented topic. We will try to see if tomorrow we have a chance we will address it. But there is a sister in the back. Let's see if she has anything. Probably it's the last question because we're getting close to 9:30.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
This is in an addition or a question to your previous comment regarding the gentleman or men's financial circumstances. And another issue is it's not so much that it's not about like a lot of women wanting a man with a lot of money. And sometimes women want to see that a man part of the deen is a man understands responsibility and understands that when you want to get married, you are responsible and want to protect. And I'm not talking about rich, but if they have a work ethic, if they care about others, or do they just want to be taken care of? Because there's a lot of men in the community who are just don't really try to push themselves and take the opportunities they have and rely and back on, oh, God will make it happen and you should marry me because I'm a good Muslim. But another side of a good Muslim is, are you active? Are you pursuing things? And are you going to be lazy or not? And so I know we keep talking about women wanting men with a lot of money, but I have a quick question regarding the fact that shouldn't the young men also shoulder responsibility to improve themselves, their community, help their family? Because that's what women look at. It's not, are you going to give me lots of cars? It's, am I going to have to take care of you, the kids, and the finances? That's, what are your thoughts on that, and how can you train both men and women? Because I know a lot of women do go to universities and try to work, but they also want an equal partner. And about deen, but also about wisdom.
Sure,
So
I mean,
that's a question.
undeniable. Islam puts the first priority or first responsibility on the shoulder of a man to become the breadwinner of the family, which presupposes his understanding that he is responsible and he has to do his best. At the same time, leaves the space open if the two partners decide that both partners intend to work. It should not be at the expense of that original responsibility that the man has. These are issues that we really need to address in ethics, rather than in the understanding of what we call contemporary framework for marriage. Some major issues, the doctor was correct, one of the major issues that somehow has become an obstacle for the youth is this notion of the huge expectation that they have of the bride, of the groom to pay or be responsible for, which has frightened a number of people. I've read statistics even about your country, Iran and Iraq and Middle East. All these, they talk about the same thing, that this has become number one in issue. Even in the United States, in places where the community lives, there is this expectation and youth running away. It should not be interpreted that if there is a challenge here, the youth can become lazy, irresponsible. No, they have to understand their responsibility. But at the same time, we have to be frank enough to address few issues that have become a concrete block in the easy getting together of two equal partners. Anyway, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.